The next topical issue is in the name of Deputy Ciaran Lynch, and it's on the need to institute a rent-to-buy scheme in respect of NAMA properties.
Thank you, Ciaran Corla, and if I could begin by thanking the Ciaran Corla's office for granting me this issue on the topical debates this evening. And I'd also like to thank Minister O'Sullivan for personally coming into the chamber this evening to take this debate. I could go on and commend Minister O'Sullivan on many of the actions she's taken on since she's come to her brief, but I've only got 4 minutes to speak, so I'd like to attend to the issue that I'd like to bring to the chamber this evening. And Ciaran Corla, that is to discuss with the Minister what consideration has been given to instituting a rent-to-buy scheme for NAMA residential properties for first-time buyers and prospective owner-occupiers. Ciaran Corla, this government has two very identifiable tasks when it comes to home ownership in Ireland, and both relate to normalising the residential property market. The first of which is to deal with those who actually have bought homes who now find themselves in distressful situations, and we have seen actions arising out of the Keane report, and the most significant of which is the personal insolvency legislation which is presently before this House. However, we also need to look to the present, and we also need to look to the future in terms of creating a normalised residential property market, one which actually sees the purchasing of a home as something of buying a property in which one lives, and not one that favours investment over that type of purchase, as we witnessed in the bubble years in this country. One of the facts, Minister, despite the difficulties of recent years in the residential property market, the Irish nation will continue to be a home buying public. I think that is a well accepted reading of the situation, and I think going into the future, young people and will still have the ambition, and families will still have the ambition to live in a home in which they own themselves. And that brings me on to the point at which I wish to debate this evening. At present, NAMA have 14,000 residential properties in the state, 9,000 of which they are actually presently renting at this moment in time. And what I'm proposing this evening, Minister, is a proposal that which a rent-to-buy programme would be put in place to deal with these NAMA properties, and a structured plan and scheme would be examined in conjunction with NAMA to make that happen. And the question is why? Very simply, at this moment in time, people who are actually interested in purchasing a home have two concerns. One is that they are concerned about the prices of houses, will they continue to drop? And secondly, they're concerned about the security of their own jobs and their own incomes. Now, with regard to the prices of houses, the government have taken action upon that, and the implementation of the property price register database, which was introduced a number of weeks ago, does give clarity and a certain degree of certainty to that issue. Now, there obviously needs to be adjustments made to that gives even more clarified information with regard to the property type, whether it is a flat or a house or an apartment, what number of bedrooms are in that property, and also what sort of square footage does the property take on board, because at this moment in time it just gives an address. There's the issue then, as I say, about salaries going into the future, and I think the option of a rent-to-buy programme allows people who at this moment in time are paying a rent that's the equivalent of a mortgage to do so over a 2 to 3 year period on a rent-to-buy programme in these mortgage properties. And that rent accruing over a period of time would actually act as a deposit, which would also deal with the difficulty of loan to values, because since 2009, rightly so, the central bank has tightened up on the lending practices of the past. We now see that loan to values need to be tightened up upon as well, along with the income levels that people have in terms of their purchasing. So it would be my estimation that over a 2 to 3 year period, people certainly would be meeting market rents in a rent-to-buy programme at the moment should be able to hit loan-to-value percentages of between 95 to 90%. The other issue is who would, NAMA themselves would be beneficiaries of such a proposal. NAMA have estates across the country, some of which are actually in category 3, goes to states, which means that they require a minimum amount of adjustment to make them, to clear them out of the ghost state ranking, but they do require maintenance, security and other observations. Doesn't it make the world of sense, Minister, that if we actually put residents into those estates who were purchasing those homes or had the intention of purchasing those homes over a number of years, we would be establishing communities, the dereliction that these sites is falling into would actually be halted, the security costs that arise from maintaining these properties, that money could be spent in actually getting them corrected, and what we would be doing is actually normalising the housing market by putting in place a rent-to-buy programme that would be robustly structured, that would have proper lending practices, and would deal with a housing crisis that is going to come down the tracks in a number of years' time, where a young population and an ongoing demand for property purchase will continue into the future, and demands for properties will have to be met. So why not actually meet them now with the situation where there are 14,000 properties in this country held by NAMA, 9,000 of which are rented? Surely we should be moving to a situation where those rented properties should now be looked at in terms of being purchased. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank Deputy Lynch for making this suggestion. I suppose in my reply I do have to put it in the context of the government's 2011 housing policy statement, which is quite explicit in taking a tenure neutral approach to housing. That is, we will work towards enabling households to access the type of housing that best suits their needs at a point in time. The National Asset Management Agency, as a major holder of residential property stock, is quite rightly set the task as part of its functions to make a contribution to the social and economic development of the state. And in this regard, the delivery of a social dividend from its stock of residential properties is a key challenge that government has set the agency. And while progress in this regard has not been as fast as we'd hoped for, they have identified over 2,000 units that may match well with my department's social housing leasing initiative that's being rolled out in conjunction with the approved housing body sector. The residential mortgage initiative product that was launched by NAMA this year may have a role in facilitating people who want and can afford to buy to realise their home ownership aspirations. But I do just want to point out that there is a fine line, and that's in the context of the policy statement that I referred to earlier, between facilitating and enticing. And I've no issue with facilitating, but I do think we have to be careful with regard to enticing, because we simply can't afford to repeat the mistakes of the recent past. And while I have no function in respect of the commercial activities of the agency, a responsibility which rests with my colleague, the Minister for Finance, I do want to say, Deputy Lynch, that I do consider that a rent-to-buy scheme could have merit, and I thank you again for raising it, in the context of providing housing that meets individual needs at a point in time. Such a scheme could provide a housing solution to households with the possibility, but not the legal obligation of progressing to purchase at a point in the future. You're probably aware that my own department launched a rent-to-buy scheme in the Dublin City Council area in 2010, specifically to facilitate Dublin City Council to deploy unsold affordable housing units in their stock. And under this scheme, the applicant will rent the property for up to 3 years with an option to purchase at any time during this term at an agreed affordable purchase price. A percentage of the rent paid can be used towards the purchase as deposit of the property. At the end of this 3-year period, the applicant has the choice of either proceeding with the purchase or not. While the fact that this scheme provides an opportunity for eligible households to test drive home ownership for a few years without the fear of getting caught out by fluctuations in the housing market isn't the main aim, there are still some very real advantages in it for individual households. And taking this into account, I will raise the topic under discussion with my colleague, the Minister for Finance, as another potential housing market intervention by NAMA. And again, I'd just like to compliment Deputy Lynch, who, as always, thinks outside the box and comes up with practical proposals. And this is one, as I said, that I will take to the Minister for Finance as the relevant minister who deals with NAMA in that regard. Deputy Lynch, 2 minutes.
Thank you much, Ciaran Lynch, and to thank the Minister for her very explicit response to this. Sometimes topical debates come in with a scripted response. It's obvious this evening that the Minister has been very, very attentive to the request of this debate this evening I put in. In the Minister's response, she talks about the 80-20 scheme that NAMA has introduced, something I think which is a very, very welcome development, which allows people to buy a home at 80% of its value, and if the property loses 20% of its value, the purchaser will actually see that over the period of time of the mortgage. The Minister has also set out what the Department's policy is in terms of being neutral, and also issues the concept of enticing people into making purchases when it might not be suitable for them. Minister, I concur with your sentiments on this, but the fact of the matter is that Ireland will remain a home purchasing nation for those that can afford to do so, and thereby lies the nub of the issue: what do we determine as affordability? It would be my view that house prices are now reaching, or almost reaching, the points of normalisation. That is, that they are in to 4 times the rate of income. And if you look at the average price of a house in the country, you'll see that it's within about 3 to 4 times the national industrial wage. So I think we're actually we're arriving at that point at this moment in time. There is the issue of social dividend as well, and NAMA's responsibility in that area. And I do know that your department has delivered housing options for homeless agencies. The 80-20 scheme is another option as well. But in terms of dealing with the enticing of concerns, I think this is a very, very unique opportunity where the lending model that would be applied in this rent-to-buy programme would actually be very robustly structured. It would reflect the lending criteria that was set out in 2009 by the central bank, which acknowledged the mistakes of the past where people were able to put overtime rentals, secondary rentals or room rentals into the equation when they were going for mortgages. And we saw the purchasing price of a house go from someone's from maybe 3 to 4 times someone's income up to 10 to 12 times people's incomes in some parts of the country. So in concluding my contribution here this evening, Cearn Lynch, what I would ask the Minister to do, and I know she is going to take this up with Minister Hogan, there is a difficulty because of the NAMA legislation as to how members of this House actually engage with NAMA, and on an earlier occasion I had to get senior council advice because of the way that NAMA is actually structured. But I do believe at a departmental level, whether it is the Department of the Environment or the Department of Finance, that some engagement should take place with NAMA. We should ask them to examine the stock that they actually have in hand. Some of that stock may not be sellable, it may be in very, very remote locations, but I do know in my own part of the country that in Cork there are NAMA estates on the periphery of the city that if there was a normalisation in the market, those houses would actually become attractive to new purchasers. And the scheme I'm promoting this evening is for first-time buyers and owner-occupiers, not as an investment model. So I would ask the Minister to make a request to NAMA that they would examine what stock they have, where the stock is actually located, where it would actually be attractive to purchasers, and also where it would be in a price range that would actually be affordable to people to actually buy in a 20 to 25-year schedule, not the sort of 35-year schedule that we've seen in the past. And that the mortgage product that would be put in place, or the structure of it, would be done in such a way that it would be sustainable, and for the prospective purchasers that it would be very much reflective of the rent that they are actually paying in these properties at this moment in time.
Minister. Thank you. Well, I suppose, first of all, I mean, our main objective, and myself as Housing Minister, is to provide options for people in the context of fairness and choice, and using the various vehicles that are at our disposal. But certainly NAMA is a player in that regard, and you referred to the 80-20 scheme, and we also have the social housing that we're engaged with them as well. And I do think in NAMA, obviously, there is a social dividend that is written into the NAMA legislation. There's also their commercial mandate, but I do think that their commercial mandate and the social dividend, in a sense, can tie in with each other, and that we can have a win-win situation in terms of the role that NAMA has been given to play under the legislation. So I think that any of these suggestions certainly should be taken to NAMA and will be taken to NAMA. In terms of policy, the relevant minister is the Minister for Finance, as I said already, and I will take the suggestion to him. But myself and Minister Hogan also meet with NAMA and have met with them in relation to, in particular, the transfer of the social houses, and they have decided to establish a special purpose vehicle in order to speed up that process. So again, I do think that any of these suggestions are certainly worthy, and this particular one is worthy of consideration, because essentially what we all want to achieve is as many options as possible for people who wish to acquire a home, who need a home, and certainly I think there's a lot of merit in this proposal. So again, I'd like to thank Deputy Lynch for raising it.
Thanks, Minister.